Welcome to Unapologetically Racist. Today, we will be tackling an issue that's combated all South Africans, and it is called the colored identity. Please make sure to like, subscribe, and comment in the sections below. And in the studio today, we have Alan Walters, who is a lay minister. Alan, thank you so much for availing yourself and coming onto the show.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
So, obviously, you're way senior than what I am, but you look very young in comparison. I would like you to just give me a brief overview of what the colored identity was, because I think off air you and I have had different discussions on it, and for our viewers, older and younger generation, to actually know the complexity of our colored identity.
I'm Alan Walters. I'm 76. I'll be 77 in a couple of months. And I'm not a historian. The facts that I am going to talk about is the truth on my own experiences in growing up. And with South Africa, with its diversity, we seem to have a lot of misconceptions on when it comes to color and the integration and lineage of where we really come from. So we do all have arguments about the skin color of us. And I think the only people in South Africa that don't have that problem, and I'm saying this with respect, are the blacks, because you have the different tribes in South Africa. But we, the westernized South Africans, we've always had a misconception on really our true identity. And I've never ever classified myself as a colored because of my experiences that I've gone through. So, yeah, that is basically on my thinking of it. When we look back, I was born when the British ruled here. Now, remember in 1962 when I started work, I had to fill my application form in. And on the application form was no colored. It was South African, Portuguese, German, French. Those were the criteria that was put there. You had to classify yourself of who you are when you made out that application on the job application. So in the British rule, there was no segregation, and I grew up with that. I had 11 years of that. And because the Bantustan was already created with the Brits, we the so-called coloreds now, when the apartheid government took over, there was a mad rush of not knowing actually how to handle the diversity of this country. That was the big problem of the Afrikaners at that time. And when the full segregation came in from 1960, there was the biggest exodus in this country of segregation was the so-called colored people. But the complications that the Afrikaners had was that we were so integrated in our Western cultures, that we came from so many different backgrounds, that they didn't know what to do. Because here we had the so-called colored people now. We look at a lot of colored people today, and you look at them with blue eyes, blonde hair, and very fair skin, but they're called colored. So this is only identity is here in South Africa, where I said I don't classify myself as a colored, I'm a South African. I'm born and bred here. So what the Afrikaners did, when the segregation came in, they everywhere was non-European and European. This was the first design of segregation by the Afrikaners. Non-European and European. So when we used to go into the train stations, even the old coaches, some of the old coaches today, if you go into the archives, you'll see there's non-European and European written in gold on the coaches.
It's funny you say that because just around the corner from us, there's a train station, and it's got the banner. It's non-European and European.
Yes. So in that era of that, there was a lot of chaos, because now we had foreigners coming to South Africa from Europe. I remember in 1964, I was at the train station, and there was chaos. There was chaos on the station when the policemen arrested a dark-skinned man for being on the European side of the station. But he was a French citizen. He was coming to South Africa for business, and they arrested him because of his color of his skin.
Sure, it wasn't because he was French.
No, they didn't know he was French. They looked at him, the color of his skin. Because when I heard him speak, I could hear him speak French. You know, with the chaos going on there. So then the Afrikaners said, no, we've got a big problem here, because there are so many Europeans coming to South Africa. So how do we define you're non-European and you're European? And yet again, they looked at the color of your skin. So if you were white, even
European.
you're European. And if you're black, you're non-European. So we had so many non-Europeans coming from Europe doing business in South Africa that this was chaos. Then they decided, and of course the Afrikaans, there was no Afrikaans in that.
Yes.
It was just non-European and European.
Yes.
But they had to change it into Afrikaans. Then, after them deciding, we've got a problem here, knowing they've got a problem, then they came out with nie blank and blank.
Yeah, non-white and black.
Non-white, white.
Yeah.
So that's this defines much better of knowing the color of the person. Is not a white, is a non-white if it's any other color. So this is where the chaos came in. And then, also because most of us, our parents, our grandparents, from my side, I've got a Filipino-Portuguese grandfather. But he was married to an Irish woman. My grandmother was Irish. From my father's side, they were German. And my grandfather worked in the Royal Navy and in Simonstown. So there was this classification on, like I said, we were not called by color when the Brits ruled here. We were just South Africans. So they couldn't define in any sense of, imagine how difficult it is here to have a couple of brothers that's light-skinned, mother and father that's got a white ID, and yeah, got my grandfather's color.
Yeah, the genetics sometimes pulls through. And
Yes.
it's also the tan. We can't help for the pigmentation of individuals.
Absolutely. And then when we do speak as intelligent people, we talk about the evolution of man.
Yes.
So how can we stop the evolution of man when our lineage is so integrated with the Western world, the people that came in, the discoverers and the explorers, they all came to all over the world. So that at that time, the Afrikaners really didn't know what to do. So they called us kleerlinge. That's the Afrikaans word, kleerlinge. And that is where the word kleerling and colored come from. Because we were not marked as coloreds. It is only the Afrikaners that defined us as not saying you are South African, but you are colored,
yeah.
South African. So that is where the lineage comes from, in the sense of labeling us as colored. We cannot go away from that because it is part of our history now. People say I'm colored, but you look at some of my grandchildren, are they colored? You'll say no, they're white. Or no, the integration of the races. Like earlier, the discoverers, That is why we have some of our so-called coloreds that are very dark-skinned. Earlier, when the foreigners came, the whites came to South Africa, they interacted with the strandlopers, with the natives that was here. If you look at the Khoisan, even the Khoisan is integrated. We that grew up through the English and into the Afrikaners, almost 65% of the blacks at that time could speak Afrikaans. They could speak Afrikaans.
So I say 65% of them could speak Afrikaans. Because you said that, because I always look at it as, when we look at colors, is colors is all colors, whether white, black, brown, oriental. Because, you know, when the harsh reality and the beauty of it is when you die and you stand naked before God, He doesn't look at your skin color. But when it came to the racial segregation part of it, was that because of the Afrikaans government at the time wanting to literally separate black from white, is in terms of being a purity thing?
It's very difficult to say, because there was never ever indications of cleansing, let's say, because if it comes to genocide, that's a different case. But there was never genocide in South Africa. There was a segregation of white supremacy, wanting to filter out those that's not white. Although we, in the apartheid government, this country was so stable, it was a mindset, and you can go back into the archives of a lot of the Afrikaner presidents speaking, actually saying that their support to the Zulus, Xhosas, and the other tribes in the country, like the English, for instance, the English said the Xhosas must have their own schools. There were schools, there was hospitals, there was clinics, there was law and order. The first language that was taught in the schools was Xhosa, and the second language was English. That was of that time, because the English language was not exposed as before, as today. A lot of the rural areas, people couldn't speak English. So they were that's why that was implemented in the Zulus and Xhosas and the other African tribes. So the government catered for that. But the distortions come when we as human beings do not understand that if you're a decent person, doesn't matter what nationality you are a decent person. And if you're a bad person, you're a bad person. And the integration horribly went wrong, in the sense of, if we look at the areas where my friends, we were mixed. And the shock came to me when I couldn't go to my running club anymore. We played cricket together, soccer together, and all of a sudden, things changed. And I'm Catholic by religion, and the Catholic schools were still very much mixed. You know, there was no color bar within in a lot of the Catholic schools. So it was very difficult for all of us, those that were uprooted from our friends, from our families. My late father was a royal firefighter. My uncles were all in the Royal Navy. My two uncles were stationed up in East Africa in the Northern Wars that was there. And it all changed when the segregation started and the identities was shifted out, because the word clearling means color.
Yes.
It's not a black and white picture, it's a clear print. And colored means, if you use the word colored now, it means diverse nations. If I take, for instance, let's say a Brazilian girl.
Yes.
Beautiful, your color, with long straight hair, and I can't say that she's a colored girl. I'm going to say she's a Brazilian.
Yeah. Because I know that, and I've seen this all, that's the beauty of the world, and of how God looks at us and makes us in His own image. Everybody is mixed. I mean, I'll look at my life, for example. I've got an Indian father and a colored mother. But if you look back at our roots, especially from my father's side, Shadrach is not synonymously known as an Indian surname. It's actually a Babylonian/Persian surname.
Yes.
So I've got a surname that derives from the Middle East. And how mixed am I? And I always look at it, and like you said earlier, Alan, the color of a person's skin should never define us. It's what's in our hearts. And when I looked at segregation, was growing up, a very good friend of mine, Nathan and I used to speak about this all the time. And to this day, you mentioned earlier about the black people not feeling the same wrath as the colored people did. But what happens when there were blacks that were in relationships with coloreds? Because what had happened was, when I was in school, Nathan and I would sit together, and we couldn't understand this notion of how people, especially our age, of coloreds, segregated other coloreds. Because it came down to the skin color. If one colored was not as light as another colored, then we would push that colored aside. And the thing that ticked me off the most was hair. If that colored person's hair wasn't as straight, we would use derogatory remarks, and we would push that person aside again. And you find out that over time, if that person had a bit of black in them, or was a black father or a black mother, and a colored father or a colored mother, whichever gene came on stronger, that person would resent being colored. And the same if it's a white person, they might have also resented being colored because of the things that we have done as people. And it just brought me back down to it when I looked at him and he said, it's such a stupid thing that we are still today indoctrinated when it comes to hair and the color of your skin. I mean, I like two sisters. Not really the proudest thing to say, but the older sister, her hair wasn't as straight as the younger sister. But I like the older sister more. And my cousin would come on and say, why do you like her more? Because she's got a fudge core. And it just upset me, the narrative upset me, because we're looking at hair, we're looking at skin tone. And whenever all negative things come to colored people, whether it's drugs, alcohol, all the negative stereotypes, it's not associated with any other nation. It's associated just with colored people. You and I, we've been doing prison ministry for a few years, and we both pointed out in the PhD the pulling down syndrome. Do you think that this could have also had an effect pre-segregation or during segregation, where people were separated like that?
Well, yeah, again, it is when we call ourselves Christians and we believe in God, that conviction that we make is very much a trend in the sense of how serious we are, in the sense of loving our brother and our sister. So, in everything that we do, even now in the 21st century, I remember going to District 6 in the 60s, for instance, and the whole of District 6 was owned by Jews. Most of the properties there were owned by Jews, and we were living mixed there. There were some Jews living there, whites, Afrikaners, coloreds, Indians. We were very mixed there. And that is always a sore point for us Cape Townians. And if we look at the other areas, I was born in Deep River. And there used to be a row of houses near Deep River Station called Terrace. And even in the Terrace, if I look at from my mother's side, all my mother from my mother's side were all classified white. They had white IDs. My father had a white ID. We lived mixed there. And then we moved from there to a small little farm that my father bought further down. And there we lived a normal life. We had the Frieses next door that had 12 children. We had the Villiers on the other side, so we have the Fries, which is a French name, or English surnames, and the Villiers is Afrikaans on the right-hand side. And here we were in between. They had 14 children. We were 10 brothers and 2 sisters. So we lived a very normal life in a sense of innocence in the law and order that was there that time. The children knew their places. We knew our places. We were brought up very strict, very, very strict. And when we come to our diversities, we've got to be very sensitive towards how people feel about that. I don't say to people that, oh, well, you mustn't say that you're colored. If you want to say you're colored, you're colored. That's fine by me. So yes, as children, there was a lot of discipline in knowing that some of us are very fortunate to come out of good Christian homes. And also at schools, we never had problems in the sense of really serious problems that we have now in the 21st century, which is so sad. So the neighborly love was always there. We could depend on one another. We could go knock on the door any time of the night. It was a different world. And as I got older, I worked for the Jew in 1963 on the foreshore, Cape Town, in a little clothing shop called Fanlight of the Foreshore. And there I had a bad experience being young. And then the apartheid system really clicked in full force. It was full force those years. And working there as a cleaner and a messenger boy and walking in the streets with placards of front and back advertising the store, I was not allowed to be in the store when whites walked into the store. I had to go to the back until they were served finished. So it took a lot of toll on me in the sense of where my personal behavior was concerned. I had to adapt. I used to ask my mom, but I don't understand what's happening out there. I'm young. Now I've got to go. Before I could get into any coach when I take the train, now I've got to look and see I get into the right coach, because we had the police on the station, we had the railway police on the station, we had the conductors in the train, and we had police on the train. It was full blast Gestapo type of thing. In the government didn't have their eyes on us in how we associate ourselves now in the adaptation of the so-called segregation. And even in the workplace it started changing. So there was a lot of challenge as far as those years. But the most important thing is this is the design of God. We cannot change anything of what happened, because right through history, there was persecutions, there were genocide. Even up till today, they just kidnapped over 200 school children. We have the 21st century where we still sit with, where are we going to? We look at the state of our very own country at the moment, where how do we get out of what is happening that seems to have gone wrong? And only now realizing that it is because we do not follow that trend in what we as human beings are trying to be decent human beings. We complain about everything. The colored people, that's why they complain about drug addicts, drugs, drug lords. So our areas are infested with satanic rituals, it is so sad that we, the good people, don't stand up in our communities and say, oh, this is the man that's killing our children. Let's get rid of him. That, our laws are so weak.
Because you know what infuriates me, especially about the laws and the weakness of it. Leviticus 18 verse 19 says, love thy neighbor as you love thyself. And obviously segregation happened many years ago. We can't keep holding on to that.
No, we can't.
I mean, when we do forgiveness ceremonies, and we have to make a list and burn those names in because we've forgiven those people completely. And I've seen it again with us on the colored side of it, with the pulling down mentalities. We look at our communities, and I have to say, specifically looking at our colored communities now, a lot of the time, I believe that it's our parents or older generations have failed the younger generation, because that indoctrination is still there. A friend of mine said to me, a colored friend of mine, very, very intelligent person, and she said to me, the problem with colored people is we think we're better than black people, worse than or beneath white people, but we couldn't be more wrong because we are actually equal. The problems that have been created, yes, they are systemic, and yes, we need to fix it. But instead of our colored kids growing up looking at teachers, ministers, police officers who actually do their jobs, doctors and accountants, lawyers, instead of looking at them as sustainable role models, our kids aren't doing that. I mean, there was a time where 15, 20 years ago, the best artisans in South Africa were colored and black. Today, with no disrespect to any Zimbabwean, our best artisans are Zimbabweans. Where's the trade gone? Because unfortunately, again, we are taught, our kids are taught that rap music is the right way to go. Dressing up in the best clothing on the outer appearance is more important than what you learn on the inside. Our education system has gone to a mess because it's more lucrative for people to pass with maths lit than actually doing proper maths. And when we say, especially our colored communities, when we say that this is why we've been held back, no, we've been held back because of the role models that we fail to see. You and I see how many colored guys sitting in prison that are crying over the same thing, over lack of accountability within the areas. We mentioned we don't want to, instead of taking on the drug lords, or a diligent police officer goes in and looks for the drug lord. Nobody wants to, the communities remain shunned. They don't want to help these people. They don't want to get rid of it. Is it because of fear, or is it because of a lack of faith in the Lord?
Yeah, there's too much that we compromise. We seem to compromise more the things that are wrong than the things that are right. And this is a big problem in our society today, because all of us argue about everything. We profess that we serve a mighty God. And like we've experienced when we do our prison ministries, when we do go visit the incarcerated, it gives us an insight almost of how the world revolves around how some of the incarcerated don't actually understand why they're really there. In a sense of doing wrong was not doing wrong, because it was compromised in such a sense as where even dockets disappear. The wealthy in this country, doesn't matter what they do, they are untouchable. The most important thing is that we will definitely, in anything that we do, especially and going again back to our so-called colored associations, it is we, the people, that are to be blamed for what is happening. And unfortunately, our law that we do have in our country is there, but it is not in a sense of how it was in the apartheid days. In the apartheid days, there was a lot of law and order. The prison was, we go to prison, and where do we see the inmates sleep? In toilets, makeshift beds. So we go to Johannesburg Medium C. We go in there and we firsthand, we hear what they say, and we see how how packed the prisons are. It's unbelievable. And it's diverse. It's just not one so-called color. And we the people must do something about it, because how can we, since the time of Adam and Eve up till now, the world is in a turmoil, and Scriptures warns of the consequences that we will face. But we must be try and be soft at heart in the sense of really how serious we are in our beliefs and our convictions when it comes to our brother, our sister, our neighbor, because the laws are all there. The laws are simple and it's easy, the laws that God has given us, but we do not live by those laws even if we profess that we serve a mighty God. We are human, we have choices, and we have self-will. But, you know, I can say with a soft heart, fortunately we still have more good people in the world than bad people.
Yeah, like, you know, it's true what you say, and I agree with you completely on that, because when the best thing about, obviously, our prison ministries, when we go in, is when we see, well, especially with the fourth day speaker, how the individuals actually speak about their lives and how it's changed. But I also like to touch on the fact that with, obviously, segregation, because I'm a firm believer, I don't look at a person's color. I don't believe in that. Because again, as I said, when we die, we stand naked before God. That's the most important thing. But also, Luke 6:31 says, "Do unto others as you want done unto yourself." I felt that, yes, segregation was wrong. We need to look past it now. Because everything that we see in the media, whether it's shootings in Rechel Park, shootings in Westbury, you mentioned now about 200 Christian girls getting kidnapped in Nigeria. And also, when we judge people on the color of their skin, again, the best book ever written, the greatest book ever written, the book with all the answers, is called the Bible. Moses' wife was not the same skin color as he was. Neither was Solomon. Solomon married multiple women. So do we look at that and we say, as a basis of racial segregation? It was never a basis of racial segregation, because throughout history, throughout all of our DNAs, we are all incoherently mixed. Again, you mentioned having a Filipino grandfather. I've mentioned having Persian ancestry. And today we're sitting in Africa. Every person, unless they're inbred, has got different DNA from different tribes, different countries. And that's what we need to embrace. And I felt as South Africans, being called the Rainbow Nation, we call the Rainbow Nation for a reason. You go into parts of Europe, it's only one color. Coming to South Africa, everybody is walking with everybody. And I think the one thing that apartheid did was teach us to be segregated and hate each other because of the color of a person's skin. Post-apartheid, and one of the greatest things was, again, was to love thy neighbor as you love thyself. Mark 12 verse 30 to 31 stipulates that love the Lord your God with all your heart and your soul and your mind and your strength. The second love is to love thy neighbor as you love thyself. No other commandment is greater than these. And I looked at it post 94, and it's so refreshing, because when I look at mixed races now, kids, they don't call themselves, they say we South Africans first. I've got a lot of friends of mine who are in mixed relationships, or mixed race relationships. And we don't ever look at it, and I say to people, that man, if it's a white man looking at a black woman and they get married, it's not, oh, I'm a white man marrying a black woman. I think this woman is beautiful, this woman thinks this man is handsome. God, you have answered my prayers, because these are the people that we want. And I think the legacy of post-apartheid is the fact that we can freely walk mixed, like it was predated before that word came about, when we're still under British control. And another thing I'd like to say is, as South Africans, we look at the problems in our colored areas. It's not a colored problem. It's a South African problem. Because again, shapes, sizes, colors, when we're in prison, we see people of different skin colors, black, white, colored, Indian, Oriental, whatever the colors are. This is a systematic South African problem that we as South Africans need to address. And a nice example of looking at South Africa when we don't look at the skin color of someone we look at our rugby team. We don't look at Rassie Erasmus and say, oh, Rassie Erasmus is a white coach. We look at Rassie Erasmus and say, that is a brilliant tactician. That is a man that knows the sport inside and out. We do not look at Siya Kolisi as a black captain. We look at Siya Kolisi as a champion of the people, looking at his upbringing, looking at his faith in the Lord. I mean, the guy kisses his forearms every game. I mean, he kisses his wrist, sorry. And what is written on that wrist is a cross and Jesus. Pieter-Steph du Toit. We don't look at him as this big white flanker that's just hurling everybody around. We look at him as a bully. Just ask Will Jordan in the 2023 Rugby World Cup final. But we look at him as someone that pushes the country forward, makes the country proud. Cheslin Kolbe and Sasha Feinberg and Ngomazulu. Again, we don't look at Feinberg and Ngomazulu as having a white father and a black mother. We look at him as saying, this is a flyer for the future. This is a superstar of the future. And Cheslin Kolbe, we don't look at him as a colored who can run fast. We look at him as a colored who's a nightmare for every front and back line team. And in closing, I would just like to say to everybody, colored identity is not based on just being colored. It's about white, black, brown, oriental, Indian. That is what defines a colored identity. And thank you once again for watching. I'd like you to subscribe, comment, and also view the channel. Thank you, and God bless.